Does the bike industry have a safety problem that no one's talking about? It's a question I started asking this week after I saw a story about a doctor who was left paralysed when the carbon fork on his Planet X gravel bike sheared in two as he was riding down a grass slope. That cyclist, Dr. Daniel Gordon, has just been awarded a £4.5 million out of court settlement. But his lawyers said the case highlighted the need for better regulation, testing and manufacturing of gravel bikes so that they're safe for the adventurous use that is shown in their advertising. So for context, the bike he was on was a £2,300 titanium Planet X Tempest SRAM Force 1. It was described by Planet X as a go-anywhere model that was, quote, lively enough on the road, but confident enough to play MTB on the trails. In fact, according to their website, the only thing the Tempest doesn't have is limits. Pictures on Planet X's website showed the bike being ridden on rocky mountainous terrain, but shockingly, during legal proceedings, the defendants reportedly suggested that the advertising was just marketing puff that shouldn't be relied upon.
That is a proper take, isn't it? Excuse my language. Like, we complain a lot about marketing, and this is probably one of the most worst cases of inappropriate marketing I've maybe ever seen.
But then to also come back when a guy has been seriously life-changingly injured and say that it's just marketing puff that shouldn't be relied upon
puff
is terrible, isn't it? It's an outrageous statement considering he has had a life-changing spinal injury. His law firm, Stewart's, has argued that while there are international testing standards for road and mountain bike forks, there's nothing currently for gravel bikes, despite their popularity. They also said that the current testing standards for those road and mountain bike and forks don't go far enough, as they don't include a test for compressive forces, and there aren't any requirements for the manufacturers to conduct any form of field testing of real-world cycling before the bike is deemed fit for sale.
I kind of feel like all bikes, gravel bikes, off-road bikes should have to meet mountain bike standards.
Yes, I don't think... What is gravel biking? Nobody knows what it is yet. This is why everybody gets upset about the name. But the argument is that gravel biking that you two do is not the gravel biking I do.
Mm-hmm.
But what you do, so this is the thing, like we jest a lot about Vieri gravel, but Vieri gravel is essentially mountain biking.
Yes.
And the problem with the United Kingdom is most of our off-road riding is actually mountain biking, but we don't want to do it on a mountain bike for whatever reason. And when you actually look at gravel as a, not a genre, as a discipline, it is basically road riding, except it's unpaved. So it is a long trail that instead of it being actually tarmacked or paved, it's just kind of got a compressed loose gravel on it, and it's smooth, it's up and down. It isn't big potholes, it isn't rock gardens, it isn't like berms. Are they called berms? They are, aren't they? Mountain biking, that's the thing. It's actually just a road that has a surface that isn't paved. And most of us, definitely in the UK, when we're doing gravel, we're actually not. We're doing cyclocross riding and more likely mountain biking. So is it fit for purpose? I'm definitely going to question the riding that I do and the bikes I use for that more in the future.
Mm-hmm.
£2,300 for a titanium full bike is crazy pricing. So I just haven't had any problems, but I also feel at that price point, you need to kind of start thinking, how are they releasing a full bike that is titanium, which is not easy to make. Titanium is one material where you can't just slap it up easily. It needs to be welded in an oxygen-free environment. You need to know what you're doing. So it's a lot more skill required. So to make a bike, I know it's not a cheap bike, but compared to what most titanium, that is in line with a more affordable titanium frame set to do a full bike.
Yeah,
you have to wonder where...
I guess the point you're making is, you know that £2,300 for a bike is still a lot of money. However, when you look at that bike as a whole versus other titanium frame sets out there, it's actually about the same price as...
Yeah. I mean, that's SRAM Force as well. So it's not the SRAM Rival or Apex or one of the basic group sets. That is one of their more premium group sets.
So this story got me thinking, do carbon forks actually belong on gravel bikes? So I asked this question to a couple of carbon repair experts. Phil from Target Composites, who are the people that made that Cannondale tandem.
Yes, I want it.
Yeah. And Rob at Carbon Bike Repair, who's featured on this channel numerous times before.
Sorry to interrupt. I have a Cannondale tandem.
It was a Cannondale Super 12.
Okay.
It was two Super 6s together.
Can they make a Trandem? What would 2 be? Sorry, 3. I want a 3-person bike.
Tridem?
A Tridem.
Yeah.
So like me, Nick, and Francis can go and do like a lap of
Hold on.
Netherlands.
No. Hold on.
And then I don't actually have to do anything.
Who's in charge of pet? I need to know before I agree to any of this nonsense. Like, who's actually steering?
Who's steering?
Yeah. It's going to have to be me.
Right.
Otherwise, I'm not in. You're going to have to find...
Okay, you can steer.
Excellent.
And you and Francis can pedal, and I am just going to sit in the middle and have a jolly.
So essentially, we just get a normal tandem and put a trailer on the back.
No, I don't want to be in I want it to feel like I'm doing something.
I'll be in the trailer
Emily's then in the trailer.
with Bella.
Yeah,
Okay, I'm going to
Anyway,
get
we
us
should
back
move
on
on.
track now.
please.
I asked the question, do carbon forks actually belong on gravel bikes? 2, Phil at Target Composites and Rob at Carbon Bike Repair. Phil thinks that in an ideal world, we'd all be better off if carbon forks weren't on any bikes, as it's a material that doesn't do well with load. Rob's answer was a little bit more nuanced. He thinks that it depends on a couple of factors. Number 1, what the bike's actually being used for. Number 2, he also thought that the frame materials should probably be taken into consideration. So he said, when you produce a bike that's made of titanium and you put a carbon part on it, the titanium behaves in a different way to the carbon. They're not necessarily complementary. In the Planet X case, and particularly because it's a gravel bike, those forks at the crown race would be taking a hell of a hammering because the rest of the frame isn't flexing like it should do on a full carbon bike. And number 3, something that they both said is that if you are going to get a gravel bike with a carbon fork, you should probably be looking at one from one of the traditional big brands, so Trek and Specialized, etc. Because while there are no standardized testings for these things, your best bet is to rely on a big company with big pockets, big R&D and quality control procedures.
The likes of Specialized or whatever, they have people in the factories where these things are being made, and they watch them like hawks, and they have procedure, their own quality control procedure.
Carbon forks can be on a gravel bike if it's produced by a major brand like Specialized or Trek, or I'm talking the big guys, because they've tested them and they are going to be fairly sure that they will work.
Whereas in the Planet X case, it looks like they were very much putting their faith in the manufacturer and their own testing protocols.
We actually talk about this a lot when we are looking at products. E-bike conversion kits are a great example of it. Various products that always just kind of feel a little bit too good to be true. I am a big believer that warranty and a brand being big enough that they're actually doing appropriate quality control is really, really important. Bearing in mind, I am the biggest supporter of independent brands you can possibly imagine. I do everything I can to work with independent brands in my own personal life. So I hate the idea that I would recommend buying a bike from a big brand. However, it is inherently a dangerous sport and thing that we do, and I want to make sure it isn't going to crumble underneath me.
Yeah, and I would also caveat this with it doesn't mean that the big brands always get it right either. You know, Cannondale had a recall on their Cadex forks because of a fracture. You had one of those.
I had that bike and it had to be changed.
Yes.
And it was custom painted as well.
It was. Specialized did a recall in 2021 on their Tarmac SL7 fork due to the steerer tube breaking, which is why Phil ultimately comes back to the point of, in an ideal world, forks wouldn't be carbon.
But in an ideal world, the full bike wouldn't be carbon.
True, and I guess there's real world application of this. Like in the real world, a lot of us are riding carbon forks.
Yes.
And they're not exploding on us.
People get, yes, you have to take it with a pinch of salt. So, I mean, we can all be, you can spin it either way, because another thing that's a massive problem is all these people chasing mega lightweight when they aren't mega lightweight themselves. So the bikes, something has to give, because to make a bike really light, you just have to take material out of it. Aluminium is a material that essentially fatigues over time, so it will crack and snap. Titanium can become very brittle. Carbon is really soft, so a small accident, dent, scratch could destroy your bike. So in an ideal world, if we want to go down that sense, but it's not going to work for everybody, just buy a steel frame. You do not have these problems with steel bikes.
Well, a steel rusts.
Yes, but what I mean is that it's not a thing of like that's over time, and you know it's not from a manufacturing standpoint. But like I say, there's no ideal world.
I do think that is a good point in the sense of we are all buying nice, fancy carbon products and are borderline obsessed with light and carbon. And I've actually been riding my Moss bike, road steel bike, quite a lot over the last 3 weeks because it's actually the only road bike I have currently. And I forgot how incredibly good it is. It's such a good bike. Caveat that it does have a carbon fork. I haven't actually ridden a steel fork, I think, ever. For an extended period of time.
In my opinion, carbon is fine for forks as long as it's made properly. There's a few factories that make almost everybody's forks. So it's a quality control afterwards, checking how it's made. We've done loads of different riding. It's a difficult one. The downside with the carbon repair side of the business is that they only see stuff that is broken, which is good. So they see loads of things. But also the flip side to that, from a bike shop perspective, we see loads of stuff, whether it's broken or not broken, see crashes. Recently I saw a Specialized SL7 where one of my friends, Paddy, rode into a pedestrian and the bike snapped into like 4 pieces. So
Jesus.
Yes, and you have got a really bad cut, ambulanced away.
I was thinking about the pedestrian and him, really, not the frame, but
It's difficult. If it's made well, I mean, I've snapped a carbon fork before, but that wasn't, I didn't crash because it snapped because I crashed.
Mm-hmm.
But then also, me and all my friends ride like idiots on our gravel bikes. We're not particularly skilled, so we're not smooth on the rocks and the staircases and the jumps we're doing. We ride in skate parks, we ride downstairs, we do silly things, and we've broken a seat post, we've broken 6 or 7 handlebars, we've broken quite a lot of wheels, loads of things carbon related, but it's generally speaking, it's impacts and things, and it's...
Well, yeah, you are a perfect case study for get an appropriate bike for the type of riding you are doing.
So my 2 latest bikes are both steel forks, and I've got another bike coming, road bike with steel fork as well. But then the downside of steel, it rides really nice. It is nice, but aesthetically, I just don't think it looks as nice.
okay, here's a question for you then. Of the failures of bike parts that you've experienced recently, what percentage of them are carbon versus other materials?
It's almost most of it's carbon or aluminium.
So you are seeing aluminium failures?
Yeah. But that's with time, it just eventually happens. So you need to start thinking of mech hangers. You need to start thinking of older frames when they start getting old. So you get galvanic corrosion eventually. So yeah, but carbon's the main one. But the downside to this is you need to understand that it's generally speaking, yes, there is manufacturing fault, but a lot of it is something's happened. Somebody's put their bike on a car, they've clamped it too hard. Somebody's dropped the bike. Somebody's had in one of our almost every single one of the handlebars we snapped was based on we crash loads and then eventually you crash again and it snaps. So it's checking things. That's why from insurance perspective for us, if anything's carbon-wise been involved in an accident, we just write it off. Whether it's right or wrong, I'm not taking the risk of telling you it's fine.
Yeah, and you're right in terms of, like I spoke to Target Composites, they deal mostly in insurance claims, and that come as a result of there has been an incident. And they definitely acknowledged that, when they're looking at most or a lot of forks, they were seeing some kind of delamination. And Phil said, if we were looking from an aerospace perspective, we'd be canning all of these because, that's the standards. But in the real world, he said, if we are seeing this much delamination, there's got to be so much delamination on bikes of people who are riding them fine and stuff isn't exploding usually. It's not an epidemic. So in real world practical terms, there has to be a different scale that we work to. And I think they did some testing with Manchester Uni, some sort of X-ray scanning to try and work out what the real world sort of scale of impact of this kind of stuff was. Because I guess at the end of the day, if something comes into you and it's a warranty claim or something, you have to take on liability. These guys have to take on liability as well. So I guess the point of this is not to scaremonger and say if you have a carbon fork, you are completely doomed. But I think really, again, it comes back to if there was better standardization and categorization, it would force the brands into doing the proper testing.
I agree.
That's a difficult one. The problem is you can have the standards, but people are going to chase lightweight, and that's going to be an issue. So it's almost like now that bikes are getting heavier, and it's getting heavier, disc brakes, for example, they need to reinforce the fork quite a bit be able to take the force where it's happening.
But that's
which is a
actually
good
what
thing, yeah.
that's actually even more of a reason for standardization. Because, for example, if you look in the mountain biking world, they're also they want things to be light, but their concept of what light is completely different to ours. And I guess this is the problem with the marketing thing. Like Rob described it as the Wild West. Everyone's trying to make the lightest, the fastest, the cheapest, but also do it all. Like, are those things even achievable? Because you're trying to compete and keep the lights on at the end of the day. If there was a standardization which said your fork needs to do this much and therefore it actually has to be heavier, at least it's a level playing field for all of the brands. So your concept of what heavy and what light is, everyone's on a level playing field. You haven't got brands who have maybe zero R&D resources trying to compete with everyone else, you know.
But your main problem there again is marketing. Marketing is a problem because essentially the industry is marketed to people that you need to make your bike lighter for it to be good. Oh, our bike is so good because it's the lights. Our bike is so good because it weighs this much. Nobody has a standardization in weight, and nobody talks to people that weight that they've saved 200 grams off of the full person and the bike and everything actually means so little that it's like, it's marketing. Because now people want lighter bikes because they've been told so many times in marketing that a lighter bike's better when it's not. It just isn't.
Well, I know that from having tested a hell of a lot of bikes over the last 2 years. Some bikes climb really well but are heavy. It's as simple as that. Some just ride really good uphill, but they're a couple of kilos heavier.
I owned a bike that weighed 4.6 kilos. It was a pig to ride. It was so uncomfortable. I really didn't enjoy it. And then my JGM, my titanium bike, with all the rubbish I put on in the bags and the lights and the bells and all the stuff, on a general ride, it weighed 13 kilos. And it just rode so much nicer. It's marketing. Marketing problem. I think gravel became a big thing because of cars. Cars, being off the road. People start enjoying it. It's social. It's nice. You go to a gravel event. People are friendly. It's fun.
Oh, I see what you're saying, yeah.
It's a nice thing. It created a community. And then essentially everybody's jumped on the bandwagon from brand's perspective.
Totally. But it's crazy seeing that there's zero testing standards for something that is different to road biking.
Yes.
And yes, different to mountain biking as well, but its own category that surely requires different things of the bike.
Yes. But that's not come in with the big brands trying to make super light gravel bikes. 5 years ago, you didn't get a light gravel bike because it wasn't the Specialized and those of the worlds making them.
You did because they were cyclocross bikes.
Yeah, but
marketed as gravel bikes.
But the main ones that started doing stuff like Genesis and those kind of brands made them out of chromoly, which is just strong. You don't have to test it. You just know it's strong.
Well, the last bit of this, something else that the experts were both very much in agreement on was that steerer tubes shouldn't really be made out of carbon fiber at all, even though everyone's doing it. So the steerer tube is the top part of the fork that sits inside the head tube. It's the bit that the stem attached to. And it ends up taking a huge amount of load, both at the top end from the handlebars and the stem and at the bottom end around the crown race. And carbon isn't a great material when it comes to concentrated load like that, according to them. Both Rob and Phil both mentioned that this is something that they feed back to brands. I think they do consultation work when there are either when something's in development or if there's warranty issues on stuff. And most of the bikes they're dealing with are road bikes being ridden on tarmac, not what is essentially a road bike with wider tyres and carbon forks that's being thrown down mountain bike tracks, where obviously there's more strain put on it. But Phil said he recommends people periodically check their carbon components for marks, cracks and deep indentations. If you've got a mark on the outside of your steerer tube and you pop your finger inside and you can feel it on the inside as well, that's telling you something. He also recommends using a nice long steerer bung to help deflect some of that clamping force and load at the top of the steerer tube. Because basically, if you look inside, lots of brands do it in lots of different ways. Some of them are tiny, some of them are long.
That's actually a really interesting one because, like, presumably, I'm interested to see what Nick says on this or if he agrees with it or not. But presumably, a long bung adds a lot of strength to that carbon bit of the fork.
Depending on how the bung's made, but also I get on my build videos, I get a lot of grief because I put spacers on top of the stem. was trying to explain because I cut my steerer above the stem or flush to the top so that I clamp a full steerer. I don't have that top 3 to 5 millimeters sticking below it. I don't completely agree with what they're saying. I mean, obviously they are the experts, but if you're gonna make your steerer out of something different to carbon, you have to bond it to the rest of the carbon.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a joint, which I think is going to be a way more of an issue than having a continuous piece of carbon made for purpose.
Well, potentially.
Personally.
And to be fair, they're not saying how they would do it. They're also not saying what the bottom part of the foot. I think all of they are identifying is that part becomes an issue. They're not necessarily giving that as a solution.
I mean, the other solution would be make it out of carbon, but then reinforce it inside. I think Cervelo for a short while, they've got an actual alloy sleeve inside. I don't know if that is for strength or just for them to put their star nut in, which is a weird one because mountain bikes run star nuts, but then they've got thick steerers. Yeah, that's a difficult one.
This topic as a whole is one of the reasons why with Cade, we are very cautious about talking about secondhand bikes. I would love for us to be able to do loads of stuff where we talk about recommending only buying secondhand bikes. However, the reality is, as Nick points out with all of the crashes that him and his mates have, if you crash a bike, it might be fine for a while and then it might eventually snap. That is one of the challenges with carbon and secondhand is you don't actually know what that bike's been through. And that is the reason that we are very cautious to say everyone should buy a secondhand bike. And I'm still right now saying don't not buy a secondhand bike, but just be really, really careful.
Totally. And I guess in summary of this, again, we're not trying to scaremonger. If you have a carbon fork on a gravel bike, we're not saying don't stop riding it. I have one. I'm not going to stop riding it. And I think the point of this is just discussing whether there's a lack of testing standard and that comes from a lack of defining of this sort of category of riding. And, it's not even saying it's rising in popularity. It's really, really popular. And therefore, I think it's important to discuss whether there needs to be more better safety standards.
Yep. What do you guys think? Comments, have a discussion. Let's start a debate and see if you think that gravel bikes are safe. Should there be better safety standards? Do you do something to potentially mitigate the risks? Like, have you got a full carbon finishing kit on your gravel bike, or do you prefer to use alloy on gravel bikes because of potential risks associated to that? Let us know.
Yes, and at the end of the day, cycling is a risky sport, but also we should trust the manufacturers to be doing everything they can to keep us as safe as they can. Actually, last point on this as well, silver lining to this story is that Dr. Gordon has managed to return to his job at the NHS. He currently works 4 days a week as a specialist respiratory registrar. He's also since taken up hand cycling and completed a cycling tour of Mallorca and this year's London Marathon.
What a legend.
Yeah.